Good afternoon, everyone. Here I am with a cup of hot green tea, and as soon as this video is over, I plan to enjoy my green tea with a little bit of my carrot cake that I made. This is a little tester version that I did this morning, and it has the little cream cheese, the cashew cream frosting, and it was just made in a little silicone heart-shaped mold. And I took a little sample a few minutes ago, and it was exactly how I wanted it to be. So we'll have that, or I'll have that a little bit later along with my hot cup of tea. But for now, I want to show you how to make the carrot cake. I see somebody's already come on. Looks like Nancy Ritter. Hi, Nancy. This recipe that we're making is carrot cake. It's a plant-based carrot cake. And plant-based meaning that it does not have any dairy, it does not have any eggs, and it's also oil-free, so it does not have oil. So I made cakes all my life for my children, for birthdays and for events and for family get-togethers. So I have made so many desserts in my life and never imagined making desserts without using all those typical ingredients. Hi everybody that's coming on. It's good to see you all. Mary, PJ, Cindy Delgado, Paula. Hey everybody, thanks a lot for attending. So why I came up with the carrot cake recipe is because we needed something like for a special occasion. It would be nice to have something that looked really delicious. It looked like a special cake, not just I can make hippie banana bread all day long, but it's nice to have something different. And by the way, you could make the hippie banana bread or the hippie pumpkin bread in a cake pan if you really wanted to, and put the same cashew cream on it and call it a cake. And people would probably be really happy with that. Hi Krista, hi Kendra, hi Carolyn from Florida. Hey everybody. So you could take the hippie banana bread, hippie pumpkin bread, and all those things we already have been making and turn them into some kind of cake with just the addition of the frosting. But we're going to make the carrot cake because it's spring, and doesn't spring and carrots go together really well? Hi Julia Buttermore. So I think that carrots and springtime and Easter go together with carrot cake. And speaking of Easter, those of you who celebrate Easter, observe Easter I should say, may be looking for something special to serve at your Easter dinner table if you're having some kind of a special dinner. So I think a carrot cake is a good dessert. So we're going to get started. Just like all other recipes, we have dry ingredients and wet ingredients. So we're going to start with our dry ingredients. And I'm going to go through this step by step so you'll see exactly what I'm using. Let's make sure I've said hi to everyone who's come on. Nancy, hi Nancy, Betty, Krista, thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate you. We're going to start with some whole wheat pastry flour. This is Bob's Red Mill. I buy it at the local Central Market, which is run by HEB. And I'm sure you can get it at other places. Some regular grocery stores, I haven't seen it, like Walmart and Albertsons don't always have it. I'm going to measure out 1 cup of whole wheat pastry flour. Now, here's my technique for measuring. If you don't have a scale, which is the most accurate way to measure dry ingredients, the next best thing is to spoon the dry ingredient into your cup and then take a table knife and level it on the top so that it's nice and level, and that's how you measure your cup. Ideally, you should have a scale and measure everything by a scale, but I don't have this recipe written out in measurements for weight. I wish I did, but I don't. So we're going to use cups. But one thing that people do that messes up their baked goods every single time, see some more people. Maya Costa, hi. Hi everybody, hi Shannon, hi Kathy, is that the bad habit of sticking their cup in the flour or whatever and then kind of, packing it in, and that usually ends up with too much flour, and then your baked good is tough and dry. And I took a semester of pastry in culinary school. We measured everything with weights, but I also took home ec back in the 70s. I don't know how many of you remember, raise your hand, or give me a smiley face if you remember home economics in the 70s, like 1970. I'm really showing my age, but we all had to take home economics. And we had a home economics teacher that just drilled it into us. Measure everything the correct way, and so it's always stuck with me. So I'm going to add a half a cup of almond flour. I'm not sure if I listed that in the ingredients when I gave you my ingredient list, because I don't think it was in my original recipe. So I changed my recipe a little bit, and I'm adding a half a cup of almond flour. If you don't have the almond flour, I'm sorry, just leave it out, because I have made this without almond flour. Oh, I see some smiley faces, the home economics people. We learned how to cook and sew. So I never forgot my whole life. I know how to cook, I know how to sew. Hi, PJ. Hi, Lindsay Simmons, hi. So I remembered all that. It's come in very handy. So who knew? But I raised 4 children. I have grandchildren. I still cook. I'm grandma. You know, I'm still a mom. I still make things. So my baking lessons came in really handy in life. The next thing we're going to add is 3/4 of a cup of cane sugar. Now I am using this Organics Pure Cane Sugar. I know some of you do not like to use any form of sugar. I fully understand. If you don't want to use sugar, you can use different varieties of sugar. You could use date sugar and maple sugar. It has a lower glycemic index. You could use date syrup. Don't use quite as much. So I'm putting 3/4 of a cup of cane sugar. I would put half a cup of date syrup. It's more concentrated. Or if you really don't want to use any form of sugar, you can make date paste and just take dates. Take a cup of dates and put 1/4 of a cup of water in a blender, food processor, and turn it into like a date paste, and you could use that instead. So you still have the sweetness from the dates, but you don't have anything that we would call sugar. So if you're really anti-sugar, you can try that. I see some more people coming on. Hi, Robert Christensen, Andrea Cohen. Hey, thanks for attending. So those are some of the dry ingredients. Then we're going to put in some baking powder, half a tablespoon. And oh, the same thing with the spoon. I put my measuring spoon in the container, and it has this little lip on it. Maybe you never noticed it. It's like a straight line. Well, that's to level off the top. Maybe you didn't even realize it was there just for that purpose, but it is. And then a teaspoon of baking powder. And with the baking powder, very similar, or the baking soda, very similar. You take your spoon and put it in there, and there's like a straight line on the baking powder or the baking soda box that you can level off your teaspoon. Because you don't want to have a heaping teaspoon. When the recipe says a teaspoon, they mean like a level teaspoon. So just keep that in mind. And then we're going to put cinnamon, a teaspoon of cinnamon. Now see, I don't have any way to level it off. So ideally I should use my little knife and not put my finger on there and contaminate the jar. So that's what I did, trying to be neat. Although my cutting board here is pretty messy. And then we have some salt. In this case, we only have 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, not too much. And those are our dry ingredients. So our dry ingredients are here. We don't use a sifter that much anymore. Another thing that I used to do, this is one of those old school things, is we sifted everything together, and that blended all the dry ingredients. Well, now an easier way to do it is just use a whisk and just whisk your dry ingredients. And it's really important to whisk your dry ingredients, because if you don't, what will happen is you'll have little pockets of bitter baking powder or bitter baking soda, or maybe your salt won't get mixed in well, and so your ingredients just won't come together very well. So it's important that you really take some time and whisk together your dry ingredients, and that's a good reason to just buy one of these whisks. Then we're going to do our wet ingredients. Let's see if there's any questions. Linda Nickel, hi. Trish Owen, hi Trish. Glenn, my son is on. Oh, there are my dogs barking. I usually don't let them in here because they're a pain. but I let them in here today. I want you to see what they're doing right now. Oh, no. I'm gonna make them leave. Okay, hold on. You guys get out here. Lift them up. Sorry about that. That's live filming. My son came home and then the dogs went crazy. They were sleeping, so I was just gonna let them peacefully sleep here in the room. Well, that didn't work, did it? Okay, so now we're going to put our wet ingredients in another bowl. So the first wet ingredient is apple butter. Apple butter is nothing more than apples. And you don't even really have to add anything. In this case, they put apples and apple juice and a little sugar. This one is a low sugar type because it's some kind of, craft made one. It's a really good quality one. You can get a really good apple butter from Whole Foods. It doesn't have any sugar at all. It just has apples. So if you want to just get the healthiest one, you can do that, or you can make your own apple butter. I've heard it's pretty easy. Just cook the apples, like maybe in your Instant Pot. And that's all you have to do is cook some apples. And so apple butter is nothing more than a concentrated form of apples. Some of you asked me what to do if you didn't have apple butter. And my answer was just use more applesauce. It's almost the same. It seems like the apple butter has a richer taste because it's concentrated. It's been sort of cooked down. So I have half a cup of apple butter, a 1/4 cup of applesauce, and this is the same old applesauce you've seen me use in the past couple weeks if you've been watching. I had a big package of it. It's an organic applesauce from Whole Foods that I bought. Let's see if there's any questions. What kind of flour? Okay, I'll show you again. Puppies, yeah, Robert, he's been to my house before. Hi, Trish, Owen. Yeah, the dogs, they're boxers. Oh my gosh, they're like alarms. This flour was the whole wheat pastry flour for the person that had the question. And then I used some King Arthur almond flour. So those 2 types of flour. I'm gonna adjust my camera a little bit. I can see it's slightly crooked and it's bugging me. There, that's better. Okay, so I'm putting my wet ingredients in. So far I have applesauce, apple butter, and then my next ingredient is 2 tablespoons of water. I've already measured it out. A teaspoon of vanilla extract. Just have your common garden variety everyday vanilla extract. We'll put a teaspoon in. All right, so really that's it for the wet ingredients. We have our apple butter, applesauce. Oh, and then I am going to add some aquafaba. This is something I also added today because I use it in a lot of my baked recipes, and it wasn't in my original recipe. I don't know if I forgot it or I just didn't think about it, but I went ahead and added it. So I'm going to add a tablespoon and a half of aquafaba. If you don't have it, it's okay because I've made this recipe without it and it turned out fine. It just lightens it up a little bit. It's like putting the equivalent of an egg in your baked good. Let's see if there's a question here, Nancy. How long does homemade apple butter last in the pantry? I've got some that's about 2 years old. I don't know. With canned goods, it depends on who canned them. Most of the time they'll tell you in like the blue ball canning or the ball canning jars booklet that I have, it says use your canned goods within a year, but that's probably, they're just saying that to be safe. So I can't tell you because I don't know where you got them. If you buy them from the store, it will have some kind of date on it. I don't see one on here, but usually they have a use by date somewhere. Oh, here it is. Best through December 2022. So that's kind of a long time. So it might be good for 2 years. I would open it and look at it and see how it looks. So the aquafaba is the liquid from chickpeas, or it could be from any beans, but normally we use chickpeas. Just drain off the liquid when you open the can, and I always put 1 to 2 tablespoon portions in these little portion cups and put them in my freezer because I use them for baked hippie banana bread usually, but a lot of baked goods. So that's my aquafaba. So those are my wet ingredients: apple butter, applesauce, water, aquafaba. That's it. And then I've already told you the dry ingredients, those are set aside. Now we've got to incorporate the two together. So I'm going to put the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. It doesn't matter, probably if any pastry expert is watching, they may be saying, oh no, you're supposed to put the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients, but I didn't, so I hope they're not watching. So I'm going to mix the two together, and I'm using a spatula. Don't use the whisk, because if you use the whisk, you tend to do too much whisking and it toughens everything up, because one of the things about cakes and baked goods, you don't want to develop the gluten in your flour. And the more you stir and mess with your baked ingredients, the flour and the liquid ingredients, the more you're going to create gluten. So I'm just barely touching it. I'm really lightly mixing it just to blend the flour into the wet ingredients, so it's not, you know, we don't want to have dry areas of white flour. So that's mixed pretty well, but you saw it didn't take that long. Then I have my carrots. I grated the carrots right before we started today, and I have my half of a cup of grated carrots. What I use to grate my carrots, and you could see a close-up of the carrots, they're just grated on a regular grater. This is like what would be on a box grater. This is just like it's my handheld grater that's falling apart. I keep meaning to order another one. I got this on Pampered Chef, so if anybody sells these things, let me know. But I just grated it. It doesn't need to be finely grated, and I don't think it's good to do this in a food processor or something that grates the carrots so small that they get real watery and they're too fine. And then what happens is it changes the texture of the cake. So you want the carrots to be grated like you would get on a normal box grater, and they're kind of dry and nice. It also makes a difference if you have good carrots. I know that probably sounds like such common sense, but these carrots are from the fresh section of Central Market, where the carrots still have all the green tops on them. And those are the ones I always buy because they're super, super, super fresh. And I usually have those. Come home, I cut the greens off, put them in my compost bin, or, you know, throw them away, but usually for compost. And I find that these carrots, they have the sweetest, most delicious taste, and it does make a difference. If you buy a bag of carrots and taste one of your carrots and it's bitter, then your carrot cake is not going to have a good taste. Everything counts when you're making something. If you want the really best carrots, grow some carrots. I bought carrot seeds, and I'm going to be planting them soon, and we'll see what happens when we have ultra fresh carrots. But if you can go to a farmer's market, if you can still go to one, or go to Whole Foods or Sprouts or somewhere that a place that has a high turnover in their produce will have better tasting carrots. Okay, let's see. I think there might be a question. I recognize your coarse grater. Oh, that's Judy. Yeah, it's a good grater. I like it. I should tell my husband to get me a new one. If I ever say I need anything, he's so sweet. He'll say, oh, I'll get it for you. So I just keep forgetting. Okay, I'm going to put 1/4 cup of raisins in here. These are also really good raisins. They're California seedless raisins I bought at Sprouts. And another thing too, if you have old raisins that are, you know, that have no taste and are like shoe leather, and you put them in your cake, they're not going to taste good in your cake. So use the best ingredients that you have. I have some chopped walnuts, 1/2 cup, and these are really nice walnuts. Use what you have, but nuts can go bad. Nuts can turn rancid really fast. I learned to keep nuts in the freezer when I went to culinary school, because they kept all the nuts in the freezer. And they lasted a long time, and we always had a big variety. So ever since then, I started keeping nuts in the freezer when I didn't use them that often. Well, now that I'm eating the plant-based way, I use a lot more nuts. So I keep the nuts here in my kitchen classroom, and this is not my real kitchen, this is my kitchen classroom. I have a kitchen inside the house. But I keep the nuts out here on a tray because I use them all the time for my cooking projects and various things. All right, so before we put this in the pans, let me see if there's any questions. I used to sell Pampered Chef, but I have the same grater, I recognize it. Okay, all right, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I can't really see your questions from back here, so that's why I have to kind of keep checking. I guess I need an assistant to come and answer questions. I watched a video a few minutes ago with Dr. Furman, and it was good, but it was kind of like a 30-minute infomercial because all he kept talking about were all the supplements he was selling. It kind of turned me off. I'm sorry, Dr. Furman, I know you're great, but please. So anyway, his daughter was there asking him the questions. She was reading the questions to him. So if I had an assistant who came here, logged in, read the questions for me, that would be really handy, but that's okay, I don't. So we're going to put the carrot cake mixture in our prepared pans. So I have 2 pans here. These are 6-inch cake pans. They're small, they're not big. This is not gonna be a large cake, but I've decided to do this to make it more festive. If you just had 1 pan and wanted to make 1 8-inch or 1 9-inch cake, that's fine. You can make whatever size you want, but I like it to be kind of a layered situation. So then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my batter into these pans. I'm gonna divide it evenly. Oh, and I think you saw I've lined it with parchment paper. That's not that hard to do. I just cut the parchment paper out by using my pan for the pattern. So if you can just imagine setting your parchment paper out. I hear my dogs barking. That means my husband's probably home. He ran out to do an errand. So what I did was I cut the bottom part by laying the pan on a sheet of parchment paper. I cut that out, and then I just put strips along the side. So that's just kind of laying in there. It's kind of like a collar, like that. And it's just laying in there on the side, and that's going to keep it from sticking. In the old days when I would bake, I would use some kind of baker's joy or spray, but you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have oil in our food, so this is a good way to do it. Now, how do I know that I have the same amount of cake batter in each pan? Well, I use my scale. This is what I usually use for any kind of baking. It's a scale. I think I got this at Walmart. And I zero the scale out. I put it on 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh each cake pan. This one weighs 15 ounces. This one weighs 13.85. So that means there's a little bit more batter in this one. And what I'll do is I will put a little bit more batter in this one, measure it, and measure this one. And now they're both 14.55 exactly. Boy, that was good. That usually doesn't happen. So now that I have the exact same amount, I'm gonna just kind of even it out. And this is really thick batter. You know, carrot cake is a very dense cake. Carrot cake is not a light and fluffy cake because it has all these carrots in it. And carrots, you know, with a lot of vegetables in a small amount of food. 1.5 cups of carrots, 1/2 cup of walnuts, and 1/4 cup of raisins. So if you piled all those ingredients up on your table, you would see that it's very dense and heavy ingredients, but you know, healthy ingredients. So look in here, you can see if there's any questions. My dogs, yes, they're sweet dogs, but they're a pain sometimes. So I have 2 evenly divided cake pans. I'm gonna put them in the oven, and I found that it took about 25 minutes this size. These are 6-inch pans. But you'll never know when your cake is done unless you check it for your own pan and your own oven. I'm gonna look at my time now, so I know it'll be about 10 till 4, I'll check it. The way you can tell if your cake is done is by sticking a toothpick in it. So when you think it's done, stick a toothpick in it, and if the toothpick comes out clean in the center, that means your cake is fully cooked. Now we don't want to overcook it, so you know, you check it before you think it's done, and usually you'll see the cake batter will stick to the toothpick. Well, then it's raw. So put it back in, check it again in 3 or 4 minutes, put the toothpick back in. If it's still wet looking, give it another couple minutes. but you'll know it's ready because the toothpick will come out dry. And that's when you know your cake is ready. So what I'm gonna do now is talk to you about what to do when the cake is finished and also show you the frosting. So I'm gonna move all these things out of the way. And first we're gonna talk about, and I'm calling it frosting, but really it's more of a cashew cream mixture. And the actual mixture looks like this. I had to make it ahead because I don't think you would have wanted to listen to the Vitamix blender worrying for the length of time that it took to get this smooth. But I will walk you through what's in it and tell you the technique. I have a Vitamix blender, and the recipe for the frosting is a cup of raw cashews. Now I'm doubling it. I doubled it for this recipe because we have 2 layers. If you just had one 8 or 9 inch layer of cake, you don't need to make a double recipe. But since we have 2 layers, I made a double recipe. I have plenty of these organic cashews. They're unsalted, unroasted. I get them at Costco in the big container. So I put 2 cups in here. I put 3 tablespoons per recipe, so 6 tablespoons of maple syrup. I used 4 tablespoons of almond milk. This is the almond milk I like. I used 8 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. You can translate that into 2.5 tablespoons. I did use some of my vanilla extract that I also used for the cake, and a couple of teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And I put that in my blender. Let's see what else up there, Shannon Russell. What temperature? 350. The cakes are cooking at 350 degrees. I put this all in my Vitamix. I started it kind of low and then I put it on high, and I really had to blend it for, I would say, a couple of minutes to get it to be this perfectly smooth consistency. You can see it, it's smooth. It's also very thick. So I did not soak my cashews because with the Vitamix, it's so powerful you don't really have to soak cashews. But if you soak your cashews, which you can do for an hour or more, be sure you drain them well. Don't put watery cashews in here and then add all this other liquid, because I made the mistake of doing that once and I ended up with this very runny, very too liquid frosting, and it wasn't that good. So be sure and keep it thick. All right, so let's say you have your cake, it came out of the oven, and this is the magic of cooking ahead. Like I told you before, I don't usually cook things ahead, but if I had not done that today, we wouldn't have a cake to look at. And I wanted you to have a cake to look at. So I decided to make my cake. I have one in the oven, and I have this one, and I told my friend, my personal trainer, who I do weightlifting on FaceTime with, that I would give him this cake, then he could come and pick it up from he lives not too far away, so I'll put it on the front porch when it's done, and he can pick it up. So he's the lucky person who gets to eat this cake. What I did was, after it came out, let me show you the rack. When you get your cake out of the oven, you put it on a rack to cool it. Let it cool for 15 minutes or so, and then I took it out of the pans and I just put it upside down on my rack and let it cool. All right? Don't be tempted to try to pull it off the rack too soon, because it might start sticking. So if you want to keep it from sticking to your rack, you can put it in the freezer for a few minutes, and that kind of keeps it from sticking, because in the old days you spray the cooling rack with some kind of spray so it doesn't stick, but we don't do that. So I use the freezer, and that keeps it from sticking. So I have 2 beautiful layers that were from those pans lined with parchment paper. I didn't do anything that I'm not telling you. And I put the first one, it sort of stuck to my parchment paper just a little bit. Didn't think that was going to happen. It looks good. I put that one on the bottom, centered on my cake pan, and let me wipe my hands off. And let me tell you about this as well. I put a 8-inch cake circle on my little cake pedestal, just because I don't want to just put it on, you know, straight on my container, because I'm giving it away. So I have to have something to put it on to transport it. And so in making cakes, a lot of times, you know, I used to make a lot of baked goods and give them to people, and I would always put them on some kind of cake circle. Now the top layer looks like this. This is the top of the cake. This, you're seeing the bottom. So I'm saving this one for the top. You can kind of see the pattern of the grid of my cooling rack on top. And it's not going to hurt anything because it's going to have frosting. Someone said, can you explain how to get your cakes out of the pan? Well, they come right out because remember, we line the cake with parchment paper. So when you take the pan and you flip it over, the cake falls right out. And you don't have to do anything. You just remove the parchment paper and you just have your perfect cake, because the parchment paper keeps it from sticking, and then you peel the parchment paper off at the end, so you don't have to worry about it. All right, so I'm going to put my cashew cream, which remember, it's cashews, lemon, apple cider vinegar, almond milk, vanilla, and I'm going to just kind of spread it around. And this is not supposed to be a fancy frosted cake. We're not frosting the entire cake. We're just putting some of this filling in the middle, and then we're going to put it on the top, because we don't really need to eat that many cashews and maple syrup. Remember, this is very rich, and you know, I mean, it's great and you're going to love it, but we don't really need a lot of it. And I almost feel a little guilty suggesting you should make such a rich dessert, because it does have sugary stuff in it and it is very dense and rich. But like I tell you, when we look at other things, I'm going to put some around the edge too so it looks nice. I make these things for special occasions. I don't sit around every day and eat rich desserts, because if I did, I think I would probably not be able to stay in the shape and the health I'm in. So I try to refrain from eating too many desserts. But like for Easter or somebody's birthday, I could see myself making this. I have made this because people like it. It's good. It tastes very decadent. So I'm taking the top layer, and I'll show you. This one still has the parchment paper on it. I did not remove that. I'll show you just how easily it comes off. So the parchment paper comes right off, and then you have this smooth, beautiful cake. And then I'm just gonna set it right on top of the cashews. And you can see a little bit has come out. That's how I wanted it to look. Just have where you could see a little bit of it. Now we could have made it thicker so you could see a bigger section of it, but I didn't do that. And then what we have, and you could serve it just like this. You don't even have to do any more, but since I have the picture shows it with a top layer of frosting on it, we're gonna put the top layer on too, just because that will look cool. And I think having the sides exposed actually looks good, because you can see what kind of cake it is, right? You can see that it's carrot. You see how thick this frosting is? It's very, very thick, and that's what you want. You don't want it to start running down the sides. It's supposed to be very, very thick and dense. All right, so I've just kind of spread it around. Doesn't have to be perfectly even. I'll put a little bit more on. I see kind of a thinner spot here. This is one of my pastry chef tools. It's just a little spatula, offset spatula I think they're called, and it's really handy for frosting things because it's flat, and it doesn't, if you try to use a knife, the knife is kind of at an angle, so this kind of makes it easier to get a nice layer. And I'm just kind of swirling it around a little bit. Now what I have next is I have some toasted walnuts that I toasted in the oven for 5 minutes at 300 degrees because I want to make a little circle of these toasted walnuts. There are walnuts in the cake, and it's fun to have something that represents what's in the cake on the top, because you can look at that and see right away pretty much that, you know, hey, that's probably a carrot cake and it's got walnuts in it. The first time I ever had carrot cake was when I moved to Utah in 1980, and I had been in the military living overseas in Japan, and I got stationed at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and some neighbors brought this carrot cake over, homemade carrot cake. I had never had one. Some of you know my mother was Japanese, and that was just not a thing that we ever had at home. So she brought over this carrot cake, and I thought it sounded and looked kind of strange. It was, you know, had cream cheese frosting, and I cut into it, and to this day I don't think I've ever had a better carrot cake, the conventional type. Now, you know, it wasn't like this, but that was the best carrot cake. And I tried to make a carrot cake like hers, but I never could get it exactly right. So now I just eat this. Okay, so everyone look, here's the beautiful carrot cake, and I can't even take a picture of it because I'm going to cut into it. And I have a picture of a similar carrot cake on my website, so it's out there if somebody wanted to see it. But let's plate it. You know, we want to see what it looks like when we cut into it, don't we? And a little goes a long way, all right? We don't need a giant piece of this because, trust me, it's so rich. You won't want to eat a huge amount of it at one time. We just want a small piece. And we're going to put it on this pretty plate. So imagine you're having your dinner and bring out your dessert, you bring out your pretty cake. It's plant-based, but it's still good. Then you give everybody a nice, beautiful piece on your plate. It's kind of slipping a little bit because this frosting is so thick. But you'll get the idea. There's your beautiful piece of very rich carrot cake. It's very dense, it's very moist. It has the cashew cream, and you can see the whole cake. I think that if you had a piece of this cake and your cup of tea and you wanted a nice treat in the afternoon, this would be the perfect thing. And if you wanted to make it for a friend, which I did, and my friend is going to get this one with the missing piece, I may have to put it back, or I may just have to give this to somebody else. But that's it. So let's see if there's any questions. Looks delicious. How many servings would the double layer make? Making me hungry. I was wondering if you flipped it. Oh, yeah, Nancy had a question. Did you flip it? Yes, I did flip the cake over when I cooled it. This would make about, I'd say about 8 small pieces like this one, okay? That's a pretty small piece, but it's really, really dense and rich. So 8 small pieces, and I think those would be plenty per serving. All right, well, that's it. And tomorrow, Saturday, we're going to be making the plant-based breakfast sausage, which actually tastes a lot like sausage, believe it or not, even though there's nothing in it that has anything to do with sausage other than some spices. The rest of it is all made from ingredients you probably have on hand, such as quick cooking oatmeal and brown rice and some spices. So I'll see you back here tomorrow, and I hope you make the carrot cake and enjoy it. Thank you, everybody.